Sensory processing can affect really everything that you do. And if your senses are dysregulated, like if your sensory system is off, it's going to be really hard to focus and be able to learn. Our senses are the foundation of all learning.
Welcome to the Helping Kids Be Kids podcast with Little Lighthouse. I'm Chinworth, the outreach manager here, and I'm here with Hannah Jimenez, our director of education.
Hi.
Hello.
Happy to be here.
I'm super excited about the podcast series we're starting today. It's all about the senses, and I think you guys are going to learn so much. Hannah has so much great knowledge to share. I ask a lot of random questions that I don't know the answer to. So I hope you guys learn something from these, and I think it'll be a really good time. But to start this off, I just wanted to ask, can you give us an overview? What is sensory processing?
Yeah, so sensory processing is how we use all of our different senses to take in information from everything around us. Our brain processes that information, and then it helps us interpret our world. So it's what helps us understand everything around us, understand our world, learn new things, and just connect with everything.
Great. And why is it important for us to know that? Like, especially when working, we specialize in early intervention, working with really young kids. Why is that important to know when we're working with kids?
Yeah, so sensory processing can affect really everything that you do. And if your senses are dysregulated, like if your sensory system is off, it's going to be really hard to focus and be able to learn. Our senses are the foundation of all learning. And so if your senses are off, like it's just going to be really hard to be able to take in and learn anything.
Okay.
And so I want to ask you, here's a little pop quiz, okay?
Oh boy, okay.
Okay.
Starting off with me already not knowing things.
So how many senses do we have?
Okay, well, before I worked at Little Lighthouse, I would have said 5.
Uh-huh.
But now that I work here, I would say 8.
Yeah, you're right.
Great.
Yeah, so there, when you're in school as like a little elementary student, you learn about your 5 senses, sight, sound, touch, taste, smell.
Yes.
You learn about those, and those are super important. There's also 3 more that don't really get talked about that are not as well known. And some experts will say that there's even more than 8. But as far as like really well researched things that we know a lot about, there's 8 that we can really like discuss and use to help us as teachers, as parents, as other caregivers, to help the children that we work with.
Awesome. We're going to do an episode about each of those.
Yeah.
And so I'm super excited to dive more into those. And again, for me to just ask random questions that I don't know the answer to. So in this series, I think we're going to talk a lot about a sensory threshold.
Yeah.
What is that? Can you explain that for us a little bit,
Yeah.
just so we have a little bit more of a context for that?
So the sensory threshold is the point at which you experience any sensation. So if you have a really low sensory threshold, that means that it's not going to take a lot of sensory input for you to feel those things from your senses.
Okay.
So if you think about like someone who has a really low, maybe like auditory threshold, that means that they aren't going to need like things to be loud. Like they're okay with like soft noises and they don't need like a lot of like loud auditory input to feel regulated. Whereas someone with a really high threshold, they're going to like love to listen to loud music, love loud concerts. They're going to love like the little kids are going to be the kids that love like really loud toys because they have that like higher threshold. And that's true of any of your senses. So you can have a low threshold or a high threshold or be somewhere kind of in between. And you can be different for each of your senses. So like I have kind of like a higher threshold when it comes to like taste. Like I love like spicy foods and sour foods and things with strong flavors. But I have like a very low like auditory threshold. So like I don't like loud things. I get very overwhelmed when places are like way too loud. I like to wear earplugs to like sporting events and concerts and stuff because I just get very like overstimulated. But like I said, with like taste, like I have a pretty high threshold. Like I love to like eat like really flavorful things. So it's just different depending on the person and which sense.
Yeah. I'm thinking of like touch. I feel like I really want a lot of that input.
You have a very high threshold.
But then with like auditory, like if I'm working on something, I like music that's like very soft or like preferably no music at all.
Yeah.
Just like silence, because I feel like I do my deepest work when it's like silent.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
I like that.
And so with that, if you have that like very low threshold where you don't need a lot of a sense, those are going to be what we call sensory avoiders.
Okay.
So like I have that like kind of lower auditory threshold. Like I'm an auditory avoider.
Yeah.
We have a lot of kids here who are like tactile avoiders. Like they don't like to play with really like messy things or touch really gooey things. And so that means they have a low tactile threshold and they're a tactile avoider. Whereas on the opposite end of that, when you have that really high threshold, you're a seeker. So we talk a lot about like people who love roller coasters or spinning or jumping off things or like jumping into our big crash mat in the gym. Like those are our like sensory seekers and they have a very high threshold.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. And so how does this affect kids? Like what is it different for kids and adults, or I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how to ask.
I mean, it kind of can be. I think as adults, you kind of like figure out like maybe even like subconsciously, you kind of figure out like what your likes and dislikes are, and you kind of learn to like navigate that. For kids, they don't always know what they're experiencing, and a lot of times they also don't know how to like communicate what they're feeling.
Yeah.
But it can lead to a lot of like overstimulation, especially in young kids. If they have low thresholds for things, it's going to be really easy for them to feel just really like overwhelmed. And so that can look like having like little meltdowns, and a lot of times that will be misunderstood as them like throwing a fit. And it's not that they're throwing a fit, it's that they're having some like sensory overstimulation and they need to feel like calm and safe and regulated to be able to like participate in what's going on around them.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like, you know, as an adult, we do learn strategies, but there's some times where I'm like, I'm overwhelmed and I'm having a meltdown. And I can communicate that as an adult with, you know, whoever I'm talking to. Like, I don't know, I'm shutting down. But if you don't have that language for that, or you can't even like tell why you're feeling that way or whatever, that would be really challenging. And I can see why that would come off as like tantrums or, you know, some bad behavior. So we're going to do a little illustration, I think.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited about this.
Okay. So
so
I'm going to show you this to just like help you guys understand sensory thresholds a little bit more. I actually saw a demonstration of this from the OT Butterfly on Instagram. She's one of my favorite accounts that I follow because she just shares so much helpful sensory information. And like, it's just things that you don't learn about, like even as professionals. Like I have a master's degree in special education and I didn't learn a lot about sensory processing. And so I've really learned a lot through like Instagram and like blogs and different things like that from a lot of really great occupational therapists. So shout out to the OT Butterfly for this idea. But I want you to think of like sensory needs as these cups. So let's say that this cup is yours and you have a really big sensory cup, whereas I have a sensory teacup. I don't have a very big sensory cup, and I get a little more like overstimulated by like sounds and like bright noises and like strong smells. Like I'm just like done. And so I want to kind of like talk about what it would look like for like our kids when they come to school. So let's say they like get up in the morning and their mom like turns their light on really bright like as soon as they wake up. So that's gonna like fill their cup. Okay, so like mine is like already like closer to halfway, whereas like yours just has a little bit in it. And then let's say that they go to eat breakfast, but their toast was burned in the toaster. So it like smells really strong. So there's more. Okay, and then let's say that they get in the car and the music is really loud and that their siblings are all just like jamming and singing along and having a great time. Okay, and then they get to school and they walk in their classroom and one of their friends is like screaming and yelling because they don't want their mom to leave. Okay, and then you get to circle time. So what do you think is going to happen when we get to circle time and we turn on the loud music?
Well, the teacup is getting a little full, so it's overflowing, and my cup still has some room to fill.
So then our poor little teacup is overflowing. They're completely overstimulated. So before you've even actually started your school day, they're already in sensory overload.
Yeah.
And they might have a meltdown when you say, come help me sing this song.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important to understand sensory systems and to really get to know your child or the children you're working with so that you can know kind of where their thresholds are and understand, okay, they're probably really overstimulated, and you can have some tools in place to help them be regulated. So one of the things I always did in my classroom was we started our day with like sensory activities. And so right off the bat, they were getting really like calming activities for their body before we did anything else.
Great.
And so just building those things into your routine to make sure that their bodies are regulated and ready to learn, so that even though maybe they had their cup start to really fill up before they even got to school, or if you think about like your kid coming home from school, when they're at school, their cup is probably like overflowing. And then they come home and they just like lose it and have a big meltdown because they've been so overstimulated all day. So just thinking about what you can do when they get home to have like a calm environment for them, you know, maybe like have a snack and have like quiet time with like low lighting if you know that your child is one that gets overstimulated easily. And then for our seekers who have room in their cup, their threshold is so high that they actually need a lot of sensory input. And so for those kids, it's really great to have things in place like where they can have big movement and do lots of things with their bodies and get their bodies moving and spinning and rolling and jumping and just moving their bodies a lot. You know, they love the like music and the loudness of the classroom. And so just, you know, doing all those fun things, they're going to really like thrive and enjoy that and need more and more. So it's great to have all of that in place for them.
I love that. I love this illustration. It makes it, I feel like it helps me conceptualize it really well. So thank you for that. Thank you, OT Butterfly, if you're watching.
No.
And then who can parents seek out, like if they need help, or if they think that, oh, maybe my child does have some sensory regulation, and they need some support in that area, who should they go to?
It's always great to just start with your pediatrician and talk to them about the needs that you're seeing, and then just ask for an occupational therapy evaluation so they can give you a referral. Some clinics don't require a referral. It kind of just depends on like insurance and different things. But seeking an evaluation with an occupational therapist can be really helpful because they are the experts on everything sensory related. And so they'll be able to help you figure out kind of like what's going on and what kind of like therapy and intervention might be helpful for your child. We also on our blog have a checklist about sensory needs. So you can just look up sensory checklist on our blog, and it's going to list out the different senses and kind of like different things for each one. And it'll help you figure out if there's an area where your child is having a lot of sensory needs, that might be something to bring up to your pediatrician or to the OT if you do get an evaluation.
Great. Yeah. I love that. So I'm super excited for this series. I think you guys are going to learn a lot, and I'm going to learn a lot. I'm so excited to listen to Hannah. Like Hannah said, we are going to have all this information on our blog, and we will also have these videos available on YouTube, as well as a podcast version that's just the audio. So if you want to tune into that, you're more than welcome to check out all those platforms. If you want to dive deeper, we also have a Little Lighthouse Academy with several professional courses that you can dive really deep into all these areas and gain certificates. We have a lot of free CEUs, which is awesome. And so, we have a lot of resources for you, and we're happy to share those with you guys. And again, just super excited about this series and hope that you guys learn a lot. So thanks for joining us today.